Hello, and welcome to another episode of Bare Bones Wargaming, a show with no bells, no whistles, no frills, just a man, a camera, and his game. Now, this episode, just talking a little bit about where I am and where I'm headed to. Last episode, at the end of Fire in the Sky, I mentioned that I was thinking about doing the War of the Worlds games that just came out from DVG. Literally, I got mine last Tuesday. And as you can see in front of me here on the table is not that game. Some of you may recognize this game. This game is called Hands in the Sea, which is about the First Punic War between Rome and Carthage, 264 to 241 BC. And that's the one I'm tinkering with right now, getting reacquainted with. I played this a couple years ago when it first came out. I did enjoy it. I haven't touched it much since then, simply because I haven't played many ancient games, to be completely honest about it. I don't know about the rest of you, but I got to go through waves, you know. Been very heavy on the Pacific Theater as of late, with a few other small things thrown in. But I kind of fluctuate with those kind of things. I kind of go on runs, if you will, to use a poker term. So that's what's coming down the pike here. Now, just to let you know, with the War of the Worlds, just some of my ideas and opinions here. First of all, there's 4 games that just came out. There's ones that cover England, France, Japan, and the East Coast of the United States. Now, of course, those of you who read the novel, you know that the novel takes place in England. And, of course, many of you are probably also familiar with the famous or infamous 1938 radio broadcast that Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the Air were involved with that caused the big panic. And of course, I grew up with both of those things. War of the Worlds was one of the first books I ever read, classic-wise. And then the radio broadcast, of course, I had heard about and finally actually got to hear because a friend of mine, his parents had some catalog of old-time radio shows or something. You gotta remember, this is back in the day before the internet and all that stuff, so finding this stuff was not easy to track down and do. But bottom line is this. I started off with this one, the East Coast one here, of the War of the Worlds, because, you know, that's where I live, on the East Coast of the United States. I will say this, if you're going to try these War of the Worlds games, do not start with the East Coast. The East Coast is the most complicated one of the group. Once I realized that and thought, okay, let me try with a simpler game, I decided to go with Japan. And again, this is probably my influence of Pacific Theater World War II that I've done recently. I decided to go to Japan and check that out. However, in the process of doing that, I've come across a few things that I'm just going to share here now real quick that have caused me to put these back on the shelf and not even really show these on my program here, simply because when it comes to a game, the bottom line is, are you having any fun in the end? It may not be the greatest game that's ever existed. It may not be one that sets the world on fire. But so long as you have fun with it, that's the most important thing. And I did not have fun with either one of those games. It just felt extremely tedious. It felt, to use an analogy, wargame analogy, it felt like playing the Russians in 41-42 with no hope of there ever being a 43-45. That's what it felt like. And now, granted, I know, in the novel, and most of you probably know too, the Martians land, they get all their machines, they start kicking butt left and right, and they eventually die because of germs, their immune system. Fine. But even that being the case, in the game it's like, it is damned if you do, damned if you don't, to put it quite frankly. Because if you don't build up enough forces and you focus on trying to get refugees out, then they're going to destroy your production areas that exist. And if you don't engage them right away, they're going to chew up your production areas. You're not going to be able to build anything. It just, again, it felt like being the Russians in 41-42 with no chance of, you know, hey, counterattacking at some point. It just wasn't there. A couple other things that kind of bugged me too was the whole refugee thing, about refugees being captured in an area where there's no tripods. Now, I did have that question posted on Board Game Geek, and I did get the answer about, you know, it also reflects the fact that refugees in an area, they need food, water, and stuff. Okay, that's fine. But do the Martians really get credit for capturing them then? I mean, it was a big deal in the novel and the whole red weed and all that stuff. But, I don't know. It just, that felt illogical to me. And then the big thing that was really illogical to me in both games was to create a new wave of tripods. You basically have to on the map there's handling machines, and then there are cylinders, and then the handling machines turn the cylinders into waves, and however many you're supposed to build with that particular wave. But then there's an event in both the Martian actions and also on the cards that allows for like a rival or a split, which abracadabra, a tripod suddenly magically appears. Well, how is that possible? I mean, okay, you could argue about recon and stuff like that, but to me it just feels gamey. It's just like a mechanism to, I don't know if attempt to balance is the right word, but it just seems too gamey for me. And I had no problem with random stuff. I'm one of the first people that when people complain about luck, I'm like, dude, you know what? Luck is part of life. But on the other hand, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again the same way, expecting a different result. And to me, that's how that feels with this kind of rule. And then in the US one, there's individual tripods you're supposed to treat as waves. And if you get a bunch of those on the board, it's just like next thing you know, you got to be trying to figure out, okay, which ones moved, which ones did I do the die rolls for. It felt a lot like work, and it was tedious to me. And again, in the bottom line, you know, I was halfway through each game, I'm like, I'm just not having any fun. You know, I mean, I guess that's the bottom line to put it. So I will say this, I'll throw this out to my subscribers and viewership here. If you guys really want to see one of these games done, I will go ahead and do it if there is a demand for it. Just to show you how the game works, the mechanics, I will do it. But other than that, I have no intention of touching these right now because there's just too many issues. There's even somebody else, there's been a couple people very active on Board Game Geek asking questions. And there's one person who put up a thread yesterday afternoon, Sunday, that basically had 9 different points they still needed to be addressed. And I completely agreed with them. And I was just like, look, this is why I'm putting it back on the shelf till some of these questions get answered. I mean, will some of these things get resolved, and will people come up with ideas to make these better and play smoother? Yeah, okay. Maybe they will. But right now, I gotta be honest, this is feeling like a swing and a miss to me. And I've had, and this is no bash on DVG games in general. I'm not a DVG hater because I own, now that I'm looking here across my room, I mean, I'm counting right off the top of my head, I own most of the Leader games. I own most of their Field Commander games, although Nimitz I have issues with. But, you know, I own quite a few of their games, and most of them have been good. The only other one I felt was a miss for me before was the U-Boat Leader, because, again, that one just didn't, I don't know, it didn't click. It didn't, again, I just wasn't having fun, and I think I eventually traded that or sold it, or I sold it to Half Price Games or something, Half Price Books rather, or something like that. So, bottom line, summary of all this here, try not to get too far off on a rant here, is I've set aside the War of the Worlds because I just wasn't having any fun. However, I will do one of them, and maybe I'll even try the England one, which I'm sure most people probably started with because that's where the original novel took place. But like I said, I live on the East Coast of the U.S. That's why I went to that game first. Again, if you want to try these, do not start with the USA East Coast because your frustration level will go through the roof, I guarantee you. Start with one of the other ones. I would say start with England. I don't know if they assumed that people would start with England. And quite frankly, the England one or the U.S. one, there's nothing in the rulebook that's like, hey, this is the hardest one of the games or that kind of stuff. So anyway, to get back to my point, if there is demand for it, I will show one of these games as part of one of my videos, if you wish. But for right now, like I said, I'm focused on this game. Let me just show you the box. This came out a couple of years ago. Hands in the Sea, which is as far as I know, and what I've come in contact with, this is the first real deck building war game. So I'm going to go ahead and tinker with it, and then I'll do a video of it because it is a lot of fun. As I remember when I played it a few years ago, Solitaire, it worked out just fine, partly because of how many cards you get a turn and the cards that are in your deck, and you're building your deck and you don't know which ones are coming up anyway, that kind of thing. And if you don't look at the opponent's cards whenever you're getting ready to play a hand, it works out fine too. So bottom line, that's where I'm standing at right now. It'll probably be a few days as I work my way through this because I'll need to get familiar with it again enough that I feel like I can share. And again, you know, as always, when I do these things, you know, if folks notice something, if I miss something or misinterpreted something, etc., you know, by all means, chime in, because we're all here to learn. So, until next time, when we will plunge our hands in the sea, literally with Rome and Carthage, this is Tim Korchnoi from Bare Bones Wargaming, saying thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the First Punic War.